June 6, 1944, marked a historic turning point in World War II as the Allies launched Operation Overlord. The Normandy landings, aiming to open a new front in Western Europe and liberate France from Nazi occupation. In the preceding months, intelligence agencies and the American, British, and Canadian military commands had meticulously prepared for an unprecedented amphibious operation, including detailed plans for coordinated airborne, naval, and ground forces. The goal was to surprise the German forces, seize key beaches, and establish a bridgehead to bring in additional troops and supplies to France. To fully understand the success of this operation, one must first examine the forces and defenses the Germans had deployed in Normandy, as well as the measures they believed sufficient to repel any landing. At that time, the Normandy region was defended by several units with impressive strength on paper, including both elite troops and less mobile formations. The 91st Luftland Infantry Division, commanded by Colonel Wilhelm Falley, was tasked with defending the Cotentin Peninsula in central Normandy with roughly 12,000 men. This unit consisted mostly of young soldiers positioned to counter airborne landings but with limited combat experience. To the east, the 709th Static Infantry Division, under Colonel Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, was responsible for defending the area, including Utah Beach, also with around 12,300 troops. This unit, largely comprised reservists, was lightly mobile, poorly equipped, and designed to hold fixed defensive lines rather than conduct rapid counterattacks. Notably, Omaha Beach was defended by the 352nd Infantry Division, an experienced unit under Colonel Dietrich Kreis, with about 12,000 troops including officers and soldiers who had fought on the Eastern Front. This was the primary unit on which Germany placed its highest hopes to hold the coastline. Another significant unit was FJR-6, Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, an elite German paratrooper battalion with 4,500 men, sent to Normandy to strengthen defenses against airborne assaults. These were some of Germany's best-trained paratroopers, averaging 17-18 years old with combat experience in Crete and other campaigns, though relatively few in number compared to the area they were defending. Their mission was to intercept airborne landings, eliminate American troops immediately upon landing, and accurately report any penetrations. In practice, FJR-6 was considered the elite of the Luftwaffe for defending beaches and critical rear areas. In addition to personnel, the Germans deployed a large number of landing obstacles known as Rommelspargel, wooden stakes 4 by 5 meters high, spaced 23 to 30 meters apart, designed to destroy gliders, entangle paratroopers, and hinder armored vehicles. By April 1944, more than 900,000 stakes had been erected in potential landing zones. Furthermore, networks of trenches, minefields, beach obstacles, and coastal defenses formed the Atlantic Wall, which Germany believed would make any landing fail without special preparation. However, a critical factor reducing German defensive effectiveness was the absence of senior commanders on site. In June 1944, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, who directly oversaw the placement of stakes and coastal defenses, was not in Normandy. He assumed bad weather would prevent a landing and returned to Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday. This absence created a crucial command gap just before the attack. On the Allied side, the plan extended beyond the beaches. A key component of the operation was the deployment of American and British airborne forces to capture strategic points such as bridges and crossroads, preventing German maneuvering and concentrated defense. The American paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne divisions, totaling 13,348 paratroopers and 3,937 glider troops, alongside about 8,500 British and Canadian paratroopers, were scattered across strategic areas. Although many drops missed their planned zones, U.S. and British paratroopers were fully equipped: M1 Garand semi-automatic rifles with 8-round magazines, personal medical kits, drugs, morphine, SCR-536 radios, rations, and personal items like candy, chocolate, and chewing gum. These were resources the Germans could scarcely imagine, especially since most German soldiers still used bolt-action Kar 98K rifles with limited supplies. Beyond technical preparation and equipment, Allied deception and electronic warfare were decisive. Operation Titanic deployed 400 dummy paratroopers made of 1-meter Hessian sacks, fitted with small explosives and sound devices, tricking many German units into believing large U.S. forces were landing everywhere. Simultaneously, on the night of June 5th, German radars at Cherbourg and Le Havre were jammed and disabled, and the main radar at Douvres was destroyed by naval bombardment on the morning of June 6th. Radio communications were disrupted by fake frequencies transmitted from England. These factors combined to create a chaotic environment, preventing the Germans from accurately assessing the scale and objectives of the landings. At the command level, German intelligence networks also completely failed. The Abwehr, Germany's intelligence agency, had been dissolved by Hitler in February 1944 due to suspicions that its officers were involved in opposition activities. Intelligence was merged into the SS, where political reliability mattered more than professional competence. As a result, information about the U.S. 2-year training of airborne forces, the assembly of hundreds of transport planes, and recognition stripes painted on all aircraft did not reach field commanders. In this context, when thousands of American C-47 aircraft began taking off from England, the Germans still believed that any landing would occur far offshore, targeting strategic objectives deep in the rear based on prior campaigns. They could not imagine that American airborne forces would be used as super infantry, dropping just a few miles behind the beaches to capture bridges, crossroads, and key areas. This lack of preparation, combined with Allied electronic jamming and superior equipment, laid the foundation for the success of the airborne operations and marked a turning point in the Normandy campaign. As the night of June 5th passed and the morning of June 6th arrived, thousands of American paratroopers began descending over Normandy. Each scattered group attacked and seized strategic objectives, disrupted German communications, isolated units, and created chaos in the command structure. Even elite units like FJR-6 were divided and unable to respond effectively. German generals received misreported, false, or delayed warnings, with some killed or wounded, resulting in slow reactions. The wooden stakes, mines, and beach obstacles could not stop the paratroopers, and German forces were forced to disperse in pursuit of dummy troops, while the beaches fell under U.S. and British control. This airborne operation was not only a military campaign, but also a demonstration of industrial and training power. Ordinary Americans, farmers, workers, students were transformed into elite paratroopers, fully equipped and deployed on a large scale, forming a force capable of defeating professional German units. They fought not only through individual skill, but also through coordination, intelligence, and logistical support that Germany could not match. This marked the beginning of the D-Day campaign, where airborne forces paralyzed German responses and paved the way for the main landings on the Normandy beaches, signaling the start of Western Europe's liberation. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, amid the quiet before dawn, thousands of American C-47 transport planes began taking off from England, carrying the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions along with smaller glider units. American paratroopers descended on Normandy under still overcast skies, with strong winds scattering many units away from their intended drop zones. Ironically, this dispersion became a strategic advantage, preventing the Germans from assessing the true scale of the invading force. Upon landing, American paratroopers faced harsh challenges. They touched down in forests, fields, and small villages, sometimes hundreds of meters from their objectives. Many were injured when their parachutes caught in trees or obstacles, but thanks to advanced medical kits, morphine, and plasma, they quickly recovered to continue fighting. One of the first units to encounter this situation was the 13th Parachute Infantry Regiment, where some soldiers landed in trees or dangerous positions but rapidly organized themselves to attack nearby German positions. At Carentan, a small but strategically vital town, the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment under Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krauss launched its first assault with fewer troops than planned due to the scattered drops. Initially numbering only 30-40 men, they gathered, coordinated, and captured key buildings, securing the town before the Germans could respond. Carrington thus became an important link between Utah Beach and inland areas, allowing American forces to move supplies and reinforcements from the beach. The German defenders, from the 91st Luftlande Division, initially had only 41 troops, mostly inexperienced recruits or conscripted Eastern European soldiers, unable to resist the flexible tactics of the American paratroopers. Within hours, 30 German soldiers were captured and 11 killed. Another notable success was Pegasus Bridge, where British glider troops from the 6th Airborne Division landed precisely, just meters from the target, capturing the bridge within 10 minutes. Securing this crossing prevented the Germans from using a key route, protected the right flank of Sword and Gold beaches, and blocked German tanks from advancing north to counterattack. This exemplified the precision, coordination, and speed of Allied airborne units compared to the slow and disorganized German response. Meanwhile, other units of the 101st Airborne, such as the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, captured crossroads, small bridges, power stations, and fields around Sainte-Mère-Église, a small town in the center of the Cotentin Peninsula. The sudden appearance of hundreds of American paratroopers completely surprised German units. Many elite FJR-6 units assigned to counter airborne landings were scattered, thrown into confusion, and unable to concentrate forces for a counterattack. While other German divisions were still hunting dummy paratroopers from Operation Titanic, American units seized the real objectives. American tactics emphasized fire and maneuver, coordinating small units and exploiting opportunities amid chaos. In contrast to the traditional German approach, which relied on fixed plans and tightly controlled command. As a result, even small groups of a few dozen paratroopers could neutralize machine gun and mortar positions and seize strategic buildings. At Brécourt Manor, for example, Lieutenant Richard Winters and a team of 24 paratroopers took out 4 105mm artillery guns defended by around 60 German soldiers, killing or capturing most of the enemy while suffering only 4 American fatalities and 6 wounded. During the seizure and expansion of rear positions, American paratroopers also gathered valuable intelligence. They found maps and German unit dispositions, enabling the coordination of future attacks. Moreover, their mobility, advanced equipment, and high morale led German commanders to overestimate American strength, believing they faced twice the actual numbers. The coordination of British forces in the east and Americans in the center further strained the German command. Although reports of British landings reached the 21st Panzer Division at 1:30 a.m., the unit could not react immediately, awaiting higher orders. By the time orders to counterattack arrived, German tanks and infantry were scattered, some still hunting dummy paratroopers, delaying the response by hours. Despite initially possessing 124 tanks, the Germans lost 70 on the first day due to Allied naval and air fire and paratrooper bazooka teams, not to mention that American forces had yet to fully deploy. A key factor in the success of the airborne operation was superior equipment and logistics. Each American carried 70 120 items, including personal weapons, rations, medical supplies, radios, lighting devices, and identification tools. This enabled them to operate independently, maintain communications, care for the wounded, and continue fighting without relying on nearby supply lines. In contrast, German troops were less mobile, poorly equipped, and dependent on centralized command and logistics, limiting their ability to respond to a large, flexible force like the Americans. On the first day, battles at Lafayette Bridge and Murder River exemplified German command paralysis. One company of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment suffered 86% casualties while fighting the 1.57th Grenadier Regiment and capturing several French tanks, yet still held its objective. The 91st Luftlande Division lost about 2,212 troops in the first 6 days, nearly 20% of its strength, with losses that could not be replaced. Post-war reports showed that Germany was completely surprised by the scale, training, and equipment of the American forces, and the dispersed nature of the paratroopers prevented them from concentrating forces for an effective counterattack. The D-Day airborne operation clearly demonstrated a difference in tactical thinking. American paratroopers were trained to adapt to chaos, self-organize in small teams, seize opportunities, and attack targets immediately. German units, even elite ones, relied on detailed plans and direct command, leading to paralysis when reality deviated from expectations. This highlighted the power of a civilian-trained, well-equipped force deployed in coordination with air, naval, and ground support. The initial events of the airborne landings completely reshaped the battlefield in rear Normandy. German units lost mobility, communications were cut, and many key decisions were delayed. This not only secured the beaches for the main landings, but also laid the foundation for the success of American and British divisions in the following days, ensuring that the first advance into occupied territory met minimal organized resistance from German forces. At dawn on June 7, 1944, the battlefield in Normandy had been completely transformed. Allied airborne forces, including the U.S. 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions and the British 6th Airborne Division, had seized strategic positions, isolated German units, disrupted communications, and created unprecedented chaos. Key objectives such as Carentan, Sainte-Mère-Église, Pegasus Bridge, and critical crossroads were now under Allied control, ensuring the mobility and supply of the beach landing forces in the days to follow. German losses during the opening days of the campaign were severe, especially among elite units. The 91st Luftlandedivision Division suffered approximately 8,000 casualties in the first week, around 67% of its strength, while FJR 6, Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, lost 3,000 of its 4,500 troops. These losses were nearly irreplaceable, as Germany lacked the ability to train and deploy new elite paratrooper units, whereas the Americans could quickly reinforce from reserve divisions and the vast industrial supply chain. U.S. soldiers, despite suffering 2,499 casualties on D-Day, were replenished within weeks due to the scale and capacity of American military production. Germany's failure was not only on the front line, but also in its command and intelligence networks. Faulty intelligence reports and a focus on imagined threats from dummy paratroopers left German commanders, including experienced generals, confused. Operation Titanic, the dropping of fake paratroopers, successfully diverted German forces, pulling elite units such as the 915th Grenadier Regiment and the 12th SS Panzer Division into meaningless tasks while the actual beaches and bridges remained. Beyond German control, this outcome also reflected a revolution in force deployment. Before D-Day, Germany viewed paratroopers as an offensive tool, targeting specific objectives in concentrated operations based on experiences in Crete and the Netherlands. In contrast, the Allies turned paratroopers into super infantry, dropping behind enemy lines to seize and hold strategic positions, coordinated with air and naval support, creating overwhelming effect and widespread disruption in the entire defensive area. Even when American paratroopers were scattered off target, their flexibility, fighting spirit, and superior equipment caused the Germans to misjudge the size of the force, believing they faced a much larger attack. Another decisive factor was the technological and equipment advantage. American paratroopers were armed with M1 Garand semi-automatic rifles, SCR-536 radios for squad-level communications, modern medical supplies, morphine and plasma, and abundant rations. While most German soldiers relied on bolt-action Kar 98K rifles, limited supplies, and traditional messengers or signal communications. This disparity not only enhanced American combat effectiveness, but also increased confusion and fear among German units facing a large, agile force. Battles at Carentan, Sainte-Mère-Église, Pegasus Bridge, and Lafayette Bridge demonstrated the power of tactical skill combined with industrial support and organization. Small airborne units of just a few dozen soldiers could neutralize mortar and artillery teams, capture prisoners, and secure vital objectives through coordination, training, and equipment. Meanwhile, German units, even elite forces like FJR 6, were scattered, poorly informed, and delayed in decision-making, unable to mount a unified response. The strategic impact of the D-Day airborne operations extended far beyond individual objectives. By seizing rear positions and creating chaos, airborne forces paralyzed German counterattack capability for the first 48 hours, paving the way for beach landing forces to advance inland. The success of paratrooper and glider units also boosted Allied morale while delivering a psychological blow to German troops, who realized they faced highly trained, flexible, and well-equipped forces far beyond what they had anticipated. The campaign also showcased the combined power of an industrial nation. Deploying more than 822 C-47 transport planes carrying thousands of paratroopers and gliders, along with communications equipment, rations, and weapons, demonstrated that a democratic nation with a strong industrial base could transform ordinary citizens into elite fighting forces through training, organization, and abundant industrial resources. This democratization of military power completely surprised the Germans, who had believed themselves dominant in tactics and training. The long-term influence of D-Day and the airborne operations continued throughout the war. The fear of paratrooper attacks forced German commanders to retain reserve units, limiting their ability to deploy mobile forces elsewhere. When the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich was moved from southern France to Normandy, the journey took 2 weeks instead of the expected 3 days due to concerns about airborne attacks and resistance activity. Enabling the Allies to advance faster across France after D-Day, Operation Market Garden in September 1944, although ultimately unsuccessful, also reflected the application of tactics and confidence in airborne forces proven at D-Day. The simultaneous deployment of 3 Allied airborne divisions during daylight to seize strategic objectives forced the Germans to exercise greater caution in moving and deploying forces, showing the enduring psychological impact of D-Day on German military strategy. Beyond tactical and strategic effects, D-Day carried political and social significance. American paratroopers were ordinary citizens, farmers, workers, students, volunteering for $50 per month jump pay, yet they defeated professional German units. They fought not for personal honor or gain, but to accomplish their mission and return home, demonstrating that a democratic nation could surpass the professional forces of a totalitarian regime through spirit, training, and industrial capacity. From a technological and equipment standpoint, D-Day marked a milestone in modern warfare: coordination of land, sea, and air forces, the use of radio communications, modern personal equipment, advanced medical care, and abundant logistics. These factors not only increased combat effectiveness, but also reshaped how nations would conduct war in the future. Germany, despite its pride in blitzkrieg tactics, elite paratroopers, and coordination skills, could not match the scale and flexibility of the Allies. By the end of the first week after D-Day, German forces were paralyzed in command, lost a significant portion of elite troops, and could not mount effective counterattacks. Meanwhile, American, British, and Canadian forces had secured the beaches, expanded the occupied zone, and established supply lines, creating momentum for the liberation of France. The airborne operations achieved strategic victories, even if some minor objectives were missed, proving that the combination of industrial power, training, and flexible tactics could create a strategically superior force, even against elite opposition. Post-war analysis shows that D-Day was a lesson in surprise, flexibility, and the integrated power of an industrial nation. American and British airborne divisions not only captured objectives, but also created prolonged disruption across German defenses, paralyzing reactions, breaking contingency plans, and inflicting irreplaceable losses on elite units. At the same time, the campaign demonstrated that a well-trained, well-equipped, and coordinated civilian force could overcome professional troops, paving the way for modern warfare and new approaches to military force generation. On June 6-7, 1944, German forces realized that 13,348 American paratroopers, along with glider troops and British-Canadian airborne forces, had turned their rear areas into a battlefield, shattering defensive plans and initiating the collapse of German forces in Western Europe. German officers and soldiers, from generals to young recruits, acknowledged that the scale, organization, equipment, and fighting spirit of the Americans and Allies far exceeded expectations, signaling the rise of the United States as a leading military power and proving the superior effectiveness of a democratic nation in projecting combined national strength. D-Day and the airborne operations entered history not merely as a successful landing campaign, but as a testament to the importance of intelligence, coordination, technology, and combat spirit, ushering in a new era of modern warfare in which well-trained, versatile, and industrially supported civilian forces could shift the global balance of power.